is Luva DiMarco. I'm an architect and artist based in between Stockholm and London, born in Sweden originally. And together with my dear friend and colleague Arya, who is an English Iranian architect based in Brussels at the moment, we've developed a project called Ruderal Acts, Gardening Beyond the Wall. Let me see if I can share here now.
The historical image of the Persian garden is one of an organized and carefully maintained landscape, a representation of a terrestrial paradise, and a model for the settlements that eventually emerged on the Iranian plateau. This idea of the garden remains unchanged today, an enclosed space that is carefully arranged, maintained, and controlled, and within which our idea of nature and the relationship between man and plant is presented as a linear narrative. Iran has been experiencing.
Hello?
And on top of that, an exhaustive water management has led to large-scale impacts on major cities and natural resources. While the idea of Tehran
the slides are not changing.
Yeah.
The slides are not changing, so we're just seeing the cover image at the moment. So maybe if you exit full screen, we can see the slides.
Let me see here. Sorry.
Now we can see the
Can
second.
you see now?
This is now the second slide.
That's great. But you can hear us, right?
Yes, we can hear the video sound.
eventually emerged on the Iranian today. An enclosed space that is carefully arranged, maintained, and controlled, and within which our idea of nature and the relationship between man and plant is presented as a linear narrative. Iran has been experiencing, and on top of that, an exhaustive water management has led to large-scale impacts on major cities and natural resources. While the idea of Tehran was developed as a garden city by a master plan designed by Victor Grun and Abdulaziz Farmanfarmayan in the 60s, the city of Tehran still persists on that idea today. While we see that the green mass from 1985 to the 2009 imagery has greatly shrinked. This is a result of a mimic of a garden city which the municipality of Tehran has pursued throughout the years. Green ribbons along the highways that are inaccessible and are water intensive and resource exhaustive. Now, Ruderal Acts considers the Ray Cement Factory as the starting point for an alternative idea of a garden, one that benefits from blurred boundaries, is shaped by the organic growth of ruderal species, and cultivated by often unintended events, the leakage of a pipe, the shading provided by a brick wall, or the migration of flora from agricultural activities. The project develops over time, not unlike acts in a play, using the city of Tehran as its stage and its citizens as its actors, custodians, and ultimately gardeners.
So the first act, through a collaboration with a local photographer, a botanist, and a curator, we surveyed this idea of a garden and documented it quite extensively. That started to lay a sort of groundwork for an atlas of this that we call a sort of garden. And it really is a sort of nuanced landscape. What we found was interesting is, you know, in this kind of landscape, what's in a way traditionally seen as artificial or as natural is kind of completely blurred. So by starting to look at, you know, documenting this as an atlas, both the sort of built elements and natural elements that had arisen on site.
With access to the site hindered by the power play between the local municipality and other actors, the perimeter walls of the factory becomes a fitting canvas to exhibit visual fragments of the garden growing within, challenging its almost complete inaccessibility. These printed fragments of the garden are disseminated further, spreading to walls and the streets of Tehran as an open call to acknowledge the potential of the ruderal landscape and the idea of the city as a garden, as opposed to a garden city.
So these posters were then, with the help of a couple of local actors, were put up in sort of a select few places around the city of Tehran, suggesting or kind of further aiding this idea that a place that is inaccessible can in fact provide something quite beautiful, and trying to sort of challenge people's imagination within this idea.
The call to action asks citizens of Tehran to act as agents of care, enlisting a community of alternative gardeners in the making of and caring for a citywide garden. Their efforts add to the atlas featuring the garden city left behind.
And so, yeah, these were really just some of the quite amazing responses that we got from this call to action. Sort of local citizen all over Tehran, sort of sending us images and footage of this care for sort of rural life within the confines of the urban of the streetscape. And these can all be seen during under our kind of gardeners tab on the website as it stands at the moment.
Now, without a defined boundary, gardening beyond the wall meets and merges with the city, but also the collective imagination of its citizens. It ultimately acknowledges and suggests that perhaps the last remains of what can truly be considered wild is in fact the city itself.
And on that note, I just want to extend our thanks to Michaela Zoppi, our fantastic graphic designer, to Hadi Zand and Amin Yosefi, our photographers on the ground, Nafiza Samadi, our botanist, and also special thanks to Amir Ali Gazemi for sort of allowing us the access, the limited access that we finally had.
Something that I thought maybe is interesting to mention is that next to us not being able to be there physically, our collaborators were also not allowed to go in after the first few hours that they went in. So the remoteness of the project is combined with a lack of access, which somehow, at least in our project, inspired us to use that as an opportunity to increase our scope of work and attention to the scale of the city. And the participation allowed us to have 40 hands instead of 4, and 40 eyes instead of 4. So I believe maybe thinking about it like this, if we had, for example, gone there physically and we were not allowed to go in, it would have been also a very different story.
Yeah, I mean, I could also add to that, I mean, I think it's always important, when you make an artistic project, to sort of think who the project is for, or who is your kind of potential stakeholder in this project. And at least for us, the very fact of the kind of complete inaccessibility to this site, I mean, not only because of lockdown procedures, but also because of this fight within the municipality, which is something that already delayed the project prior to the pandemic. That in itself almost became a kind of vital driver. So in the sense that, if no one is able to even enter this place, then we felt that it became up to us to then translate this space through a series of different mediums, and probably different media than what we would have originally anticipated. So, perhaps we would have engaged with this as a three-dimensional space, but now we're forced to sort of take that through digital imagery, printed medium, collaborations and interpretations. So in that sense, it did provide a certain richness, I think.